everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started and in interest of everybody's time tonight. I will ask if you will, upon entry, make sure you are muted. And Ashley, I think I have unmuted you if you want to make sure. Can everyone hear me okay? Ashley, you want to do a check?
Sure.
Here you go.
Uh, Everyone kind of give a thumbs up or just kind of a wave. You can hear us okay.
Excellent. So, welcome to our CEU event promoting successful collaboration between OTs and OTAs. We do want to let you know that this meeting is being recorded tonight, so you can view it however you feel most comfortable. If you want to show your camera, please do so. If you feel more comfortable having your camera off, please do that as well. We also encourage you to participate in this. We'll have a couple of opportunities for some audience participation and engagement. So please feel free to participate. I do want to read something from Aspire OT before we get started. Um, this webinar is being offered as part of TNOTA's partnership with Aspire OT. Once the webinar is complete, return to the course where you access the link for this webinar. You can then advance the course until you see the quiz. Also, there will be a 4-digit code that will be part of the quiz, and I will be giving you this code at the end of the webinar. Once you complete the quiz, you will need to provide your name for the certificate when prompted. After entering your name, you will be able to print or download your certificate. So, my name is Jennifer Henderson. I'm an occupational therapist. I am the co-chair of the Student Involvement Committee with the TNOTA, and I am adjunct faculty at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center. And I do want to tell you a little bit about how this program came about. This summer, we were having an executive board meeting with the TNOTA, and it was announced that Ashley Robertson, our OTA Connect chair, wanted to do a collaboration event and specifically focusing on student practitioners. So I thought this would be a great way to collaborate with the Student Involvement Committee, as we usually do virtual student chats quarterly, and make this be a combined crossover type of event between the OTA Connect Committee and the Student Involvement Committee. So I'm super excited that we're able to do this for the first time ever. Um, we'll advance forward and let you see a little bit about me, but I do want to also introduce our co-presenter, Ashley Robertson. Ashley Robertson headed up planning this and doing the slides, so I do want to recognize her and thank her for doing that. Ashley Robertson is a certified occupational therapy assistant who is the current chair of the TNOTA Connect group. She graduated from Bloomsburg University in 2005 with a BS in exercise science and Penn State Berks in 2015 with an associate degree in occupational therapy. She holds several specialty certifications, including pediatric kinesiology taping, animal assisted therapy. She's trained in handwriting without tears and most recently finished certified anxiety informed professional training in March 2024. She has clinical experience in a variety of settings, including nursing facilities, hospitals, early intervention, outpatient pediatrics, and school based occupational therapy. She recently presented and created a social media series for the TNOTA on building a better relationship between OTs and OTAs in March, and is currently working on a presentation and resource guide with her committee for advancement of occupational therapy assistance. I also want to recognize a couple of other individuals who had helped with this program. Dr. Piper Sassanen graduated from Belmont University in 2003 and has worked in adult rehab and served as a fieldwork supervisor. She is on faculty at Nashville State as a program director and is also on the Faculty Senate, a fellow at the Teaching Center, and a member of the TNOTA CEU Committee and Collaboration Committee. Also, Dr. Stephanie Lancaster is our program director at the University of Tennessee Health Science Center and the current president of the TNOTA. She will be helping man the chat and is available for questions as needed. And I also want to recognize Nicole Rowe, who we will be referencing in this presentation tonight with Aspire OT. Next, we're going to go over briefly some of our learning objectives, what we want you to do by the end of this short webinar. While I'm going over these, if you wouldn't mind dropping in the chat if you are an OT, if you are an OTA, if you are an OT student or OTA student, or even if you serve in academia, we'd love to hear who the audience is tonight. We have several OTs. Wonderful. We have some OTA representation as well. So that's wonderful because collaboration is important, not just for the OTA and OT relationship. It's also going to be important as a student and your supervisor relationship, as well as in other leadership types of areas. So the things that we want you to know by the end of this presentation are to know the current Tennessee state regulations and guidelines for supervision between OTs and OTAs. We invite you to collaborate in our open panel discussion about methods and strategies to help promote successful collaboration between OTs and OTAs. And we hope to explore current and future ideas within OT educational programs to help support collaboration between OTs and OTAs and our OT practitioners in general. So next, I'm going to hand it over to Ashley, and she is going to discuss the Tennessee Supervision Guidelines.
Okay, so welcome everybody to tonight's webinar about promoting successful collaboration between OTs and OTAs. So the first thing that we're going to briefly review are the supervision guidelines for the state of Tennessee. And these guidelines are accessible through your Tennessee Board of Occupational Therapy regulations, as well as Tennessee does have a required supervision form that is to be filled out by both the OT and the OTA regarding their supervision. And the information that we will be reviewing on this slide is all listed on that form in terms of the type of supervision, whether it was in person, through email, through phone, and then what types of things were discussed. So interventions, goals, planning, and then the frequency of how often that supervision is going to occur, which we will get to. There are different levels of supervision that are required, and they do vary based off of years of experience or whether or not you're in a new practice setting environment. So to get started, Tennessee defines supervision as a collaborative process that requires both a licensed occupational therapist and licensed occupational therapy assistant to share responsibility. And the goal of the supervision and a relationship is to enhance and promote quality services and professional development of individuals involved. So Tennessee does have 3 levels. They are first entry level, which is when an individual has less than 1 year of work experience or they are in a new work practice environment, and they would require close supervision. Tennessee defines close supervision as daily direct contact at the site of the treatment. And then,
hey, so sorry to interrupt, but your
yeah,
slides are not showing up right now.
fix that. Thank you for letting me know. It says I'm screen sharing. So let me.
Maybe undo it, unshare, and then share again.
And then if that doesn't work, then, well, I have another participant saying they can see it.
Maybe I have the wrong view on. Oh, here it comes.
Is that better?
Okay, other people could see it. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
You're
I'll
good.
be quiet.
Can everybody hear us okay?
Yes, good audio.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so again, we're going to kind of just review. So entry level is when the individual has less than 1 year of work experience or they're in a new work practice environment, and they would require close supervision, which is defined as daily direct contact at the site of treatment. So the next type of supervision is considered intermediate level supervision. And that is when the individual has 1 to 3 years of work experience and they would require routine supervision, which is defined as direct contact at least every 2 weeks at the site of treatment with interim supervision occurring by other methods such as telephone or written communication. And lastly, there is the advanced level of supervision, which is when the individual has more than 3 years of work experience and they would require general supervision, which is defined as at least monthly direct contact with supervision available as needed by other methods. And so again, these are available via your Tennessee Board of Occupational Therapy regulations to review further if you do have any questions. But what we are going to do is we are going to move into the 10 tips to build a strong OT and OTA relationship, and Jennifer is going to review these for us.
Thank you. I'm going to admit a couple of people
Sure.
while we're transitioning over. And I do want to recognize Nicole Rowe. She is on this call and she is one of the co-founders of Aspire OT, and she is an occupational therapy assistant. And I had found this article months ago before I realized who Nicole was and put those connections together. So it's just really interesting that we are using her article. So I really love that connection for us. And she has given us her gracious permission to reference her in this part of the presentation. So we're very appreciative of this. And this article is found on the AOTA website, and it was written back in 2016. But at the beginning, she talks about relationships being important in occupational therapy, and not just like the employee-employer relationship or student and supervisor relationship, but she talks about the OT and OTA relationship, and there was just less information on that. So she wants to focus on that and the topic of collaboration, which is important not just in our work setting, but also in our state associations and things like AOTA, in different volunteer organizations. We all need to be successful collaborators. And here are 10 tips that she gives to help increase our confidence and strengthen our relationships with our fellow occupational therapy practitioners. The first one is to use our AOTA resources. One specifically is the guidelines for supervision, roles, and responsibilities during the delivery of occupational therapy services. Now, Ashley just touched on the Tennessee supervision guidelines. AOTA also gives guidelines, which include things like supervision based on the complexity of patient needs, the diversity and number of clients, the different knowledge levels. So make sure you are utilizing those AOTA resources that we have easily accessible. The second is to know your state laws. And Ashley touched on this a minute ago, but also being aware of your third payer party guidelines, your work and facility guidelines, because certain insurances have different rules and regulations as to supervision. So you'll want to make sure that you check those out. Third, understanding that it's a two-way street, not just in treatment, but also in documentation. Both sides are responsible for that and for sharing in the responsibility of that. Fourth, putting that ego down. And this goes on both sides. It's important for the OTAs to remember that it's the OTR's license that is on the line. So maybe that's where some of the sensitivity might come through. And it's also important for the OTRs to recognize the skills and the expertise of the occupational therapy assistants. We all come with a different skill set, different education, different life experiences, and definitely different continuing education opportunities. I know I've talked to Ashley several times about continuing educations that she has attended. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. So I would go to her with questions about some of those specialty topics. fourth, embracing strengths and weaknesses. And this will be covered a little bit later in our presentation as well. But being aware of your own strengths and weaknesses and working on those, as well as the person that you are collaborating with. And in the same respect, being honest about those strengths and weaknesses, what you might not know or might not have access to different resources, just being honest and establishing that trust and that relationship, and always making sure that our client is top of mind and keeping them safe. Seventh, always be appreciative. There have been multiple studies in different workplaces about burnout and job satisfaction. And one of the top reasons that employees give for not being satisfied at work is not feeling appreciated. So, whether you're a supervisor of employees, whether you're a supervisor of an OTA or a supervisor of students, always be appreciative on both sides. The eighth one is communication is key. So it's important to understand and appreciate how your colleague communicates and how you also communicate and what your strengths are and what they're not. And if you perhaps need to go over something verbally and then follow up with an email for that type of communication, just make sure you understand the best communication styles of each participant. 9, don't be possessive. The OTR should not refer to the OTA as my OTA. And even in the same respect, not my patient either. We should be referring to the client in the client's best interest and the client's um, plan of care and plan of treatment. And then the last is to celebrate the love of OT. I would be willing to bet that none of us on this call tonight got into occupational therapy because it's a moneymaker. It's it's not. We got into it for the love of occupational therapy, and OTs and OTAs have way more in common than we have different. So just remember that and celebrate your collective love of OT. So next Ashley is going to share more about collaborative practice.
Hi, everyone. So, as OT practitioners, we do realize how important evidence-based practice models are within our practice of occupational therapy. And so, this was also found on AOTA's website, and it was a draft paper completed by some OT practitioners about using the interprofessional collaborative practice model, or what is referred to as the ICP model. And this is a great model, not just for OT practitioners, but interdisciplinary practitioners as well, because it is defined as multiple health workers from different professional backgrounds working together with patients, families, and communities to deliver the highest quality of care. And we all do know that that is the reason behind what we do, is providing the highest quality of care and doing what's best for our patients. And so to further advance that, they went in and they discussed the idea of interprofessional teamwork. So before we get started with reviewing the information on this slide, this is where we are going to be opening up the discussion to our audience members. So we do want a collaborative communication. We do want to hear your ideas. We do want to hear your thoughts on the various topics. And so as we go through this slide and the information, we will be prompting you to kind of engage in the conversation. And we do want you to engage with one another. We want you to engage with us. We want to hear those questions. We want to hear what your thoughts are about these different areas and how we can improve as practitioners all across the board, and not just focusing on that OT-OTA relationship, even though that is the primary topic of tonight's discussion. And so to get started, we are going to define interprofessional teamwork, and that is defined as the levels of cooperation, coordination, and collaboration, characterizing the relationships between professions and delivering patient-centered care. And so one of the key topics of discussion and one of the key questions that I have received from previous discussions about this topic, especially from the student level, is what is the expectation of how long that relationship should take to develop. And essentially, there is no correct answer and there's no definitive answer because every single relationship you enter into, whether it's an OT, OTA relationship, a OT supervisor relationship, an OT PT relationship, a speech PT relationship, any relationship that we enter into is going to be different based off of those two individuals joining in on that collaboration. And so that is something to remember, but research does say that in order for a supervising relationship to be successful, it does take 6 to 9 months, which seems like a really long time to develop into what is known as a high performing relationship. So that's really what we all should strive for as practitioners is that high performing relationship in that supervision level. And so that will vary. So some individuals will take 6 months and some it will take 9 months. But also, as we develop those relationships and those collaborations, we also do need to remember that conflict is the norm within any relationship and that we should not avoid it or try to solve it, but embrace it. And so, as we open up our first discussion to the audience, we want to know whether you have examples of conflicts that you've experienced, or if you have strategies to share of how to embrace conflict within a supervisee relationship. So you can feel free to either unmute yourselves at this point and talk, or you can also place your questions into the chat box, and Stephanie will monitor that chat box and also let us know. So we are going to take a minute or two to kind of open up that discussion. So if anyone would like to share their experience, feel free to at this point.
Actually, I think in one of the settings that I've been in, something that has caused a little stress or a little conflict is just like a lack of information on this supervisory relationship and how often to do it, and when does both practitioner, when do they have that time carved out in their schedule to do the supervision? Do you have any suggestions for that?
So, from my experience, I have worked in multiple different settings. So, it will also vary on your setting and also the availability of both practitioners and their schedules. And so, the most important thing to do is if you do feel like you are more at that entry level practitioner level or that intermediate practitioner level that we did review, I would suggest having carved out sit down time to be able to discuss in more detail what that relationship looks like and what expectations you have for one another. And if you're more at that advanced level, maybe you don't need as much one-on-one FaceTime, but you do need to collaborate on what works best for each individual. And so some people prefer email communication, some people prefer in-face communication. And so it really also depends on working with whoever you are supervising or your supervisee to figure out what's best for them. And then also working with either facility directors or your managers and discussing what that looks like for both of you to meet those needs in order to provide that high quality care for your patient in the end.
Mhm. And that's a great thing for students to ask when they are looking for a new job, whether it be OT or OTA, new hires, is when do I have that time carved out in my schedule? Ask the supervisor, do you allow me that, and how often and how much time, to maybe save some of that stress or conflict that might come in the future. We do have a comment in the chat by Heather, is a seasoned OTA, and she agrees that communication is key.
And that's great because that's actually going to be our next kind of topic of discussion. And so, our next kind of topic of discussion, moving from conflict, is communication. And so, simple changes in how team members speak to one another can either facilitate or damage the collaborative relationship. And this can be as simple as the tone that they use. And so, we as practitioners do have to be aware that it's not always what we say, but it's how we say something. And so if it's not working and we might be saying it one way, we can always collaborate with our supervisor or supervisee and figure out and strategize what works best and that communication breakdown. And there are also tools and resources out there for us to utilize as practitioners. And so we don't always have to refer to OT resources as well. We can definitely use other resources out there within our field of occupational therapy to improve and promote successful collaboration. And so there's resources and tools to explore strengths, values, conflict styles, leadership styles, and more. And having this knowledge will also build empathy and understanding of each other. And so that kind of communication is very important to have from day one of sitting down with one another and discussing what works best for you, what type of learner are you, this communication, are you a visual learner, are you a verbal learner, do you like feedback often? Do you like feedback on the spot? Do you like feedback pulled to the side? So everyone's going to be different in terms of their preferences. So really kind of just understanding each other at a more personal level of what works for you is going to help promote that successful growth within that relationship and decrease that conflict. But do remember, as we discussed, that conflict is the norm. And so if you get to that point, conflict is going to be the norm. So don't think that just because you've been in a relationship for 3 or 4 months and everything's going well, that there might not be those points that some conflict that we have to work through will come up. So we're constantly growing as practitioners and individuals. And that's the important thing, is that we come alongside one another and help each other grow and promote each other's strengths and weaknesses. And we work together to provide that highest quality of care. And so that does kind of open up our next discussion point. And that is, has anyone either used or knows of resources that have been helpful to them within building supervisor relationships that they would like to share? Or just examples of how you communicate with your supervisor or supervisee that works for you?
One thing I'll say, Ashley, is that I distinctly remember before I started working with the first OTA that I worked with years ago, I remember thinking, oh, I hope this person's personality is just like mine, because I think we'll get along really better if she's just like me in the way I approach problems and do my paperwork and communicate. And what I discovered after working with this particular OTA, who is one of my best friends still today, 30 years later, is that that actually wasn't true. It was much more formative to me. And I think I'm a better OT today because our styles are very different. And I'll tell y'all who it is because some of y'all know her. It's Gwen Fox. And she has been in the TNOTA leadership and, has been around on the scene for many years. And she taught me a lot of what I know as an OT practitioner. And one thing that I learned along the way, and I'm going to share a resource in the chat in just a second on this, is to really watch my language in the way that I speak about OTAs. And I think that this is a mistake that's made in our profession way more often than it should be. I don't think it's out of callousness or cruelty, but I do think it's not the best way to speak. Yes, David put in the chat, it's not my COTA or my OTA. I don't own her and she doesn't own me. We are each other's partners, and one thing I think you guys might think is interesting that some people may not know is in our profession, what OTA stands for is occupational therapy assistant. In some other adjacent professions, including physical therapy, that even though the abbreviation is similar, what it stands for is not. PTA stands for physical therapist assistant. And if you think about it a second, I think that's a really important designation. So I'm going to share this little article that came out pretty recently in OT practice that talks about being inclusive in our language when we speak about OTAs. And I think it really does influence our thinking, which influences our behavior. There it is.
Well, thank you for sharing that, Stephanie. Does anyone else have anything to share about communication? Okay, so with that, we are going to move into our last topic. And if you do feel like you think of something as we continue to go along, we will have time at the end of the presentation to go back and also facilitate collaboration and communication about anything presented in today's presentation. And so the last topic that we're going to discuss is the topic of trust. So we all know that trust within a relationship does impact the collaborative relationship of that supervisee and supervisee roles. And so without trust, there's no teamwork. And what I found interesting about this AOT article is the idea that they said without a sense of psychological safety, a collaborative relationship may never turn into a high performing relationship. And so, what does that term psychological safety mean? And that typically is the concept where both team members can speak candidly and ask questions without fear of consequence. And so I do like that term because I do feel like within collaboration, having that trust built there and understanding and empathy for one another will help encourage and develop that psychological safety feeling for each individual as the relationship continues to grow. And so to summarize all of this information up, in terms of developing high performing relationships, what does that look like? How does it start? How conflict is addressed? How to communicate with one another? And how to build trust? I am going to share a testimonial from an occupational therapy practitioner who did start as an OTA in her practice, and she did go back to school to become an OT. However, her description of how she feels a successful collaborative relationship is developed is a great summary of what we just all discussed. And so at this point, I'm going to share that with you. So she was asked what helps develop a successful supervisory relationship. And she said, I believe integrity, trust, and understanding develops a successful relationship. Integrity allows you to know that you will both do what is always right. This leads us both into trusting each other in making decisions, intervention planning, and creating a plan of care for our patients that will progress them and do no harm. Understanding begins with knowing the expectations and legal requirements of each provider's scope of practice. It will then progress to understanding the support and type of relationship and communication styles that both of you need. And lastly, understanding each other's professional goals and knowledge of the field of occupational therapy allows for a foundation to excel in a supervisory relationship over the years. And so if you really are kind of looking for that breakdown, I do feel like her testimonial when she answered that question was a great resource for other practitioners to follow in terms of understanding those laws and regulations. That's the number one. Understanding each other's role within the scope of practice, and then getting into understanding each other more on a personal level in terms of communication styles and understanding and empathy of one another. And then we get into how we can work together as a team to develop and that professional care to provide that highest quality of service. And then lastly, making sure that we don't become stagnant and that we, as a collaborative relationship, continue to grow with each other and continue to push each other. because we always learn something new from each other each and every day. And so that should never stop, that we should always be willing to learn and grow our knowledge within our field of practice, because it's always changing. Rules are changing, laws are changing, treatments are changing, billing is changing. So there's always something that is going to be changing that we do need to rely on each other for, that one person may be more knowledgeable in than the other person. We need to take those opportunities to grow and learn from one another throughout the many years of practice, whether we've been in practice for 6 months all the way through 30 years, we're constantly learning from one another. And so does anyone else have any experience before we move on about kind of building that trust or communication among their supervisee or supervisor? Okay, so what we're going to review next is the idea, just briefly, about some team making decisions and some approaches that you can take. So there were 4 main approaches that they did discuss within that same article, and they are a collaborative approach, authoritative approach, a delegative approach, and a consensus approach. And so these approaches also will vary depending on the circumstance and the situation, and also can vary from setting to setting and individual to individual. So these are just some options, but these are not also the only options. So they're just kind of keys that we can reference back to figure out what works for that particular situation. So in a collaborative relationship, perspectives are valued and the team chooses one person to make the final decision. An authoritative decision approach is helpful for quick decisions or when the leader holds the expertise to make the decision. A delegative approach supports each team member to lean into their expertise, and a consensus approach values all perspectives and decreases hierarchy. And so now that we've discussed team making, decision approaches, and interprofessional teamwork, we are actually going to expand that into how can we develop this at the student level. So we are going to have Piper chime in, if she is available, to discuss the most recent ACOTE guidelines for educational programs regarding the collaboration between OTs and OTAs.
Hi. So yes, I am Piper Cessna, and I'm the program director of Nashville State's Occupational Therapy Assistant Program. So thanks for having me on. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath, just ran in from a soccer game. I was not playing, but my daughter was, but I'm the one that's out of breath. So a couple of things is I just wanted to come on and give the perspective of educational programs and why we think collaboration, both inter and intra-professional collaboration, is so important, and what we are doing in educational programs. Now, I know we have some educators on this call, but this is what we do at Nashville State. So just a couple of reminders. So we have an accreditation. It's the Accreditation Council of OT Education. And so they are the ones that give our curricular standards of what we need to teach in both OT and OTA programs. For us educators on the call, sometimes we love ACOTE. Sometimes ACOTE is not our very best of friends, but one thing ACOTE does not do is they do not tell us how we have to meet the standards. So we are able to look at a standard, and we have the opportunity for each program just to kind of meet their standards in whatever way that we want. We do have some brand new standards that have come out, and I know Jennifer and Stephanie can attest to this. I saw a pretty good increase in the verbiage of inter and intra professional collaboration in the actual standard verbiage. We have always had that within our program, but with this increase in the verbiage, what we have done is we have added some events and collaborations with like Tennessee State. So our students, what they do is we work with Belmont University OT program, and so we do some collaborations with them. So we actually will go, our students will go over to Belmont, and we have different case studies about different levels of supervision. And so from the OTA perspective, what they need for supervision, from the OT perspective, what they need for supervision. We also work with our nursing program for the interprofessional collaboration. So one thing that we did last year is the fourth semester nursing students and the third semester OTA students got together. The OTA students taught the nursing students how to do safe ADL transfers, taught bed mobility, like safety precautions, and then the nursing students taught the OTA students about how to document INOs, how to really understand all of the machines within an ICU within those different type of settings. So we were able to do that collaboration. Another thing that we did was an IADL meal, which was really fun. So we invited our all of our administration, our faculty, and our staff, and the OTA students. What they did is they took on a diagnosis with the deficits, and they prepared a meal for the guests. And then the guests were actually able to sit down and ask questions of the clients as they were in the role of their diagnosis and deficits. So those are a few things that we do when it comes to inter and intra-professional collaboration. I know this main call is about intra-professional collaboration. I'm so glad that somebody, I can't remember who said something about the difference between OTA and PTA. On the very first day of class, we actually tell our first year students, the brand new students, our newbies, what the difference is, and also the importance of collaboration. We do have an OTA on faculty at Nashville State, which is great. And so we're able to, within any of our competencies or any of our checkoffs, we're able to give the OTA perspective as well as the OTR perspective. And anytime that we have any type of checkoffs or assignments, we're always asking not only what your clinical reasoning is for the treatment plan, but let's collaborate with your fellow workers. Also, let's collaborate with your OTR to see exactly, are we meeting the goals? Is the treatment plan what it needs to be? How can I help you as the OTR? How can you help me as the treating OTA? So those are some of the things we do. Like I said, I kind of wanted to give the educational perspective, because I know, as I'm sure all of you are fieldwork educators or clinical educators, and all of our students that come from educational programs come to clinicals, and a lot of times they have a different type of assignments. There's reasons for those assignments. And so we try to make sure that the intra-professional collaboration is really distinct in those assignments. And the reason being is because it's so very important. So that is what we do at Nashville State. I know we have a couple other schools represented on this call. I didn't know if anybody had any questions or comments about the educational program and our perspective on why, on how we make sure that we address the inter and interprofessional collaboration, or any ideas of what we can do.
Thank you for sharing that information. That was super useful, super helpful. And Dr. Lancaster might want to speak up more for the University of Tennessee Health Science Center, but just as an adjunct faculty member, I know about some of the different collaborations that we do between the occupational therapy students and the physical therapy students, such as instructing the PT students how to fabricate a resting hand splint, and then they lead a transfers lab. I'm sure there's a lot of other things that go on, but that's one that sticks out in particular to me that I have heard about. Dr. Lancaster, do you have anything else to add about that?
Yeah, I mean, what Piper said is true. There is a lot of push for interprofessional. I wish there was more for intra-professional. But we do at UTHSC do both in lots of different professions that our students learn alongside. In fact, this coming Monday, the OT students will be going to the University of Memphis speech therapy classroom, and we will have a collaborative assistive technology workshop that we do every year for the speech therapy and the OT students, and that's really fun. But we're always looking for more opportunities to combine groups of students because that's how it is in the real world, whether it's OTA partnership or OT practitioner in another profession partnership. It's really some of the best way to learn.
And one thing that I have found in the time that I have been at Nashville State is that giving students a place to feel safe, like we tell them, this is our safe place. It's okay that you mess up. It's okay that you say the wrong thing. And then we're going to teach you how to be professional, teach you what it means to have professional behaviors, and teach you what it means to have a collaborative relationship. And advocate for yourself and also advocate for your patients at the same time. Because I've had relationships in the past with OTAs that have not gone well. And I actually use some of those stories as examples. I had a OTA come across the table at me one time because she was not happy with what I had said in a meeting. And I was like, what is happening right now? And so we're able to use those type of real life experiences that are so important, because we actually also have a new type of learner and a new type of student that is coming in. And so some of our students are the students that were COVID students, that they were either finishing high school, beginning their college career during COVID. And so some of their social skills and their interpersonal skills and the ability to communicate face to face versus text, some of them have challenges with that. And so that's part of our intra-professional collaboration education too, is how to have a face-to-face conversation, especially with somebody that you may not agree with, but do it on a professional level. So I think that's probably the most challenging thing that we've had to deal with this last couple of years, is how to teach an adult how to have a face-to-face conversation with somebody. So I don't know if anybody else has had that issue, not just in the educational aspect, but if you have students from a school of like them just not knowing how to communicate with somebody face to face.
So speaking of students, Jennifer, did you notice, do we have any students on this call tonight?
I didn't see any checking in the chat, but we may have admitted one just a few minutes ago.
Okay.
Students that have anything to add about how their programs are addressing communication, in-person communication between professionals.
And if you're not comfortable speaking, you can feel free to enter it into the chat box as well. And so with this conversation, that is why we decided to do this presentation, is to promote more conversations and more collaboration about how to improve these successful relationships from the student level, and then also how to improve these relationships as practitioners moving forward as well. And so we all have our experiences in different settings with different supervisors and different supervisees, and we all have our individual preferences of what has worked and what has not worked for us. And so that's really what we can build upon each other and learn from each other is within our own experiences, sharing those experiences with others so that way they feel more comfortable opening up and they feel more comfortable building that trust with one another. And so we do want to promote it at the student level because we did feel that through educational programs that there was not so much of discussion about what that looks like for students when they get out of school and what to expect with that collaborative relationship. And so we wanted our students to really understand that relationship moving forward as they enter these fieldwork assignments. And one experience that I will share that some maybe fieldwork educators would be interested in, or some educational directors would be interested in, is that within my level 2 fieldwork, with being a OTA, I was actually paired with an OTR student at the same fieldwork placement. And so we both had our supervisors, but the director really promoted that OTA relationship building and working with one another regarding the same caseload to really understand how that relationship works in terms of OTs and OTAs and their roles and expectations within a patient's plan of care. And so if you do have OT students or OTA students, or even students, if you enter a fieldwork placement and you ask that question, it's okay to ask, is there another student going to be here at the same time? Even if it's another interdisciplinary student, a PT student, a PTA student, a speech student, that's a great opportunity for our students to learn how to collaborate also within that interdisciplinary practice. Because a lot of places you work, we do have OT, PT, and speech all on the same site. And so we all are collaborating within that patient's plan of care with each other and operating under our scopes of practice. But our scopes of practice do work together in many areas. So we do have to remember that as well. So to wrap it up before we get into open discussion, Jennifer is going to kind of just review what we discussed tonight.
Yeah. I do want to make one comment before we wrap things up and give you the code for tonight. We have a comment about a rehab manager just had some of their employees complete a self-assessment on emotional intelligence that was divided into 4 sections, including self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management, which helped them reflect on how they work together and with their clients. But that I could see how that could also be beneficial to do amongst workers as well, or students as well, how that could be valuable. So we've talked tonight about understanding and knowing our supervision rules and regulations in our state. We always want to be cognizant of using evidence-based practice models in our treatments, such as the interpersonal collaboration practice that Ashley talked about tonight. And we've had a great discussion about the different things that educational programs are doing around the state to help improve collaboration between disciplines. Are there any last minute questions or comments before I go into reading the information from Aspire on the code and showing you our resources?
Can I say one quick thing?
Yes, please.
So one of the things I think as an OTA is important, and when we collaborate, is to really listen to the other individual about and share each other's goals. I know a lot of times in my career, I have really been pushed to bridge to become an occupational therapist, and there's nothing wrong with bridging. But I can achieve the goals that I want to do with my career by not bridging. And I love being an OTA and I don't want to bridge. And so thinking about understanding, like for an OTA, what does career advancement look like? And if you need a bridge to advance a career, for example, if you want to do an eval, you probably need a bridge. But I co-own a company and I'm still an OTA. And so I think that that's so important. I had a very well-intentioned OT very early in my career said, you need to bridge. And I said, I'm not really interested in bridging. And she's like, I just feel like it's such a waste since you won't become an OT. And she didn't mean it that way. Like, she was trying to be encouraging, but she really devalued what I did as an OTA. And so really trying to think about like what we say and how we encourage others to actually support what they want instead of dreams, instead of like what you think their dream should be. Sorry, I'm tired.
No, that makes perfect sense. And thank you so much for sharing that, Nicole. And I think that that's a great summary of what we have discussed tonight, and being appreciative and recognizing each other's strengths and goals and communicating. I feel like this is something we could do ongoing and do even more talks about the topics. So as you can see, our last slide is the references for tonight. If there's something that you want that we haven't referenced, just reach out to Ashley or myself, Nicole, Dr. Sussman, Dr. Lancaster. And I do want to tell you our code for tonight. So to access the quiz for the webinar, return to the course where you click the link for the webinar, and then you can advance the course until you see the quiz. And the special code for tonight is 0924. So that is today's date. We didn't do it on purpose that it's the it could be the date with the month and the date, or the day and the year, date, the month and the year. So we really didn't plan it that way, but it's a great way to remember it. So once you've completed the quiz, you will need to provide your name for the certificate when prompted, and then you enter your name, and then you can download your certificate. If you have any questions, you can reach out to info@aspireot.us with any questions regarding the handouts, the quiz, or the certificates. Thank you so much for everybody that has commented, that has given thoughtful consideration to the topics that we've talked about tonight. In the interest of time, we're going to stop for now, but it looks like we've got some good ongoing communication and conversations that we have. So on behalf of Aspire OT and the Tennessee Occupational Therapy Association, we thank you so much, and everyone stay safe and have a great night.